Hello, welcome to Psych Yatra, a podcast by Student Council of School of Vedic Sciences under MIT ADT University. I am your host today, Sanya, and we have our guest, Miss Anushree Bodhale, ma'am. Would you like to introduce yourself, ma'am?
Thank you for the welcome, Sanya. So I'm Anushree Godhale and I have done my MA in clinical psychology, after which I have worked in development of aptitude testing and also developed and constructed psychometric tests for a few industries. I am also pursuing my PhD and my area of interest is cognitive psychology.
Okay, so cognitive psychology is a really vast subject and it's an interesting subject. Would you like to explain what cognitive psychology is and how is it interpreted around and how it is basically in a psychology course and about it?
Okay, so cognitive psychology is basically the study of your brain and the thought processes, the mental processes which are going in your brain, right? So, right now, when I am talking to you, I am trying to remember what I have studied in cognitive psychology, what it means, and what do I need to then select and convey to the audience with respect to what is the correct content, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot many cognitive processes that happen in all small actions that we do. So be it taking out something from your refrigerator to taking down notes to writing an exam, anything that you do is dependent on processes like memory, uh, problem solving, a lot of things which are going on, perception, sensation. So cognitive psychology basically studies all of these processes within the context of psychology. So how that is applied to human behavior as well as emotion as well.
Okay. So cognitive processes that happen in the brain can be tracked by MRIs and fMRIs. That's what we have been taught till now.
Yes.
Would you explain how this works, like in a gist?
Okay, so what happens is that up until some time ago, your brain was interpreted and studied by the theories which were there in psychology. Now you can observe behaviors, you can observe a person's emotions if he displays it through a behavior, right? But you cannot really understand what is going inside the brain
Yes.
when the person is doing something. So that is a very, I would say, fantastic evolution of sciences that has happened, science and technology that has happened. That with equipments like MRI machines, fMRI machines, you can actually see what is going on inside your brain. So for example, if I'm trying to remember what I studied in geography in school, right? So in cognitive psychology, I'm looking at long-term memory. So now when I'm trying to think of this, if I have an fMRI machine, I can see which parts of my brain are active. And then I can say that, okay, when you're trying to recall something which you've studied long back, or when you're trying to retrieve something which you've studied before or learned before, your long-term memory is engaging XYZ number of areas of the brain. Now, how is this important? If I were to say that, okay, I want to train somebody's brain, or I want to train somebody to improve their long term memory, so then I would have to target those areas of the brain. Similarly, if let's say there is, God forbid, a mishap and they get some injury to the brain, so I would know that, okay, if the injury is to this area, then this is the function that is going to be affected. Alright?
Yeah.
So, along with its application in medical sciences, it has actually paved the way for a lot of research in cognitive neuroscience and cognitive psychology, because of which we can now understand the whole functioning of cognitive processes much better.
So are there some experiments that have been conducted for to finding out what goes on in cognitive psychology specifically?
Yes, so the reason why we do experiments here is that not everybody can go and get an fMRI machine or an MRI machine and get a scan every time you want to study a cognitive process like attention,
Definitely.
memory, right?
Yeah.
So, which is why you need experiments. And the thing with cognitive psychology is that these experiments are really fun and they are very interesting. So, for all our viewers, you can go and actually do this experiment on YouTube. So, it's called a selective attention task by Daniel Simons. So, I'll just tell you what the experiment is to give you a
Definitely.
feel like what experiments are in cognitive psychology. So, what you do is that when you go onto YouTube and see that video, you will see that there is a team which is playing basketball, and you have to count the number of passes which are being done. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what most people miss here is that there is a small hidden thing in that video, which, because you're selectively focusing only on the passes that a person is doing in that, or the team is doing in that, you end up missing that small detail of uh, information which you would otherwise know if you knew that you had to pay attention to that, right?
Yeah.
So this is the process of selective attention that is actually happening. So take the example of when you're actually watching a movie, and your full focus is on the movie. So even if somebody makes like a small movement in the seat next to you, or a few rows here and there in a movie theater, you might not notice it as much. Or if I ask you 10 days later that, oh, what was the color of the dress that this particular person who was sitting 2 rows besides you in a movie theater wearing, so you might not remember it because you have not paid attention to it, selective attention to it, and therefore that content has not gone in your memory, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very simple to describe cognitive process, I would say, but equally difficult to put in an experiment and then prove. So we have various such interesting experiments which are done for various processes. So that is why it is very, very important also to keep the experimentation going on in cognitive psychology. It also tells you how various processes interact.
Definitely. I hope our viewers would go and see that YouTube video. Well, next question is really interesting. How do we enhance our cognitive abilities? Like, it's a brain related thing. So, we can obviously enhance it with the practices and training. So, how can we do that?
So, the need to increase cognitive abilities happens, one, when a person is actually suffering from an injury or a mental illness where the abilities are hampered. Okay, so in cognitive psychology, we call that cognitive remediation, where you are essentially making sure that the person, if they have lost the function of an ability, they get that ability back, or at least some function of that ability is restored, if not full. Second is that when children are growing up, a lot of inputs actually help in development of these abilities in the long run. So something as simple as the puzzles that you solve, the crossword puzzles that you solve, are a great exercise for recalling and getting information back from long-term memory. Okay, so these are small exercises. Or for example, if you are asking a child to sort out, let's say if you've mixed shapes together and you're asking to sort out shapes, you're sorting squares, then triangles. So here what the child is doing is focusing on that, a selective attention again, and trying to sort it out. Or the memory game that children play, so each child tries to remember a list of the things that they are being told, and then they have to recite it, so which is like an elaborative rehearsal. So such small activities that we do in our day-to-day lives actually are helping us either maintain the functioning of cognitive abilities, or actually helping us improve those abilities. So recently there was a research done where they said that actually old people who solve puzzles on daily basis, the ones which even come in your newspapers, have a slower rate of decline in memory, what we call as dementia, right?
Yeah.
So we are not saying that this is going to prevent dementia altogether, or this is going to prevent Alzheimer's, but at least it can help in little ways here and there.
It slows down the process.
It slows down the process, or it delays the onset.
Yeah, we have studied about it in human lifespan
Correct.
development. Well, you talked about kids. So, kids with dyslexia or some kind of brain related disabilities, I would prefer to say, how come this cognitive psychology or these cognitive things can help them out?
So, what happens is that whenever there are children who have a certain disorder like dyslexia or ADHD, so their cognitive abilities are actually hampering their performance that you see maybe in school, maybe their disorder also, like what symptoms they are showing. So, for example, in dyslexia or in other learning disabilities also, nowadays research has suggested that there are problems with their working memory, which is essentially like how you're holding information in what you're doing right now, keeping
Yeah.
it and then reproducing it, right? So now if I'm not able to keep in my mind that okay, CAT is C says ka, A says a and T says to, and then I have to mix it together and pronounce the word cat, right? So this is one function of memory that is going on, working memory, which is going on when you're learning how to put words, sounds together. The phonology that we study as children, that is a function of your working memory. So now if the child is not able to work on this mixing of the sounds together, then working on their working memory, improving that will actually help them do this and then learn that what can you say, the subject or the academic skill much better, like reading, writing, all of those things. So similarly, if a child has attention deficits that you see in ADHD, so if you work on their attention as a cognitive ability, it is obviously going to help the child in the long run. So nowadays actually there are very interesting computerized games also which can help the child build this ability. So what they do is they have a baseline. So where am I right now in this particular skill? And then they customize that program to your skill. Then they take it forward and then they train you with that ability. So it becomes a child gets actually very engaged with those games, and the child has motivation also to play the games, but at the same time we are working on their abilities.
That's really good for kids. Talking about these games and all, our lives are hugely controlled by AI nowadays. So, is there some relation between using artificial intelligence with the cognitive psychology?
It is, I would say, beneficial because like we said that if you can actually make games and if you can actually use AI to aid their cognitive development, okay, or even something as simple as I read recently that people who have Alzheimer's and have a difficulty in remembering what is to be done next, if they have a simple smartphone where they can put alarms with the text, you have to take pills right now, you have to, let's say, go out and do this work right now. So with this you're actually helping them live a much better life. So in the progress of technology, I would say it would definitely help people who have problems with their cognitive abilities.
That is really good. And okay, so you were talking about career counseling, like you have been a career counselor.
Yes.
What would you like is a role of a career counselor, and how does it impacts a student's life?
Very, very, I would say it is one of the most important things that a student needs to get is a good career counselor.
Definitely.
Because a career counselor is not only telling the student what to do next, but essentially giving a roadmap to their future. Why I say roadmap is that we live in a world which is ever changing. So we cannot say that okay, do only this or only that. We can give you options, we can give you strengths, your own strengths, what you are good at, and we can tell you what is a path that you can follow, right? Along with this, correctly identifying the student's strengths, the areas in which the student is weak or needs certain improvements, and then how can we utilize all of this together to find a career path which is suitable to the students is what is important.
Yeah, that is really important, especially in this racing around of the world in
Yeah.
career. So, what is it like to have, like, if what are the benefits of having a good career counselor?
So I used to give this example to my clients when they used to come to me. That imagine that you want to become a doctor, Hmm? So a doctor needs to do what? The doctor needs to be very good with research, reading, memorizing material, to be able to understand that, apply that, have good problem solving strategies. So each new case is like a new problem that you are conceptualizing and giving a solution to that, right? Now these are the cognitive skills which you require in being in the medical field, or even attention to detail is what you require while performing surgery. Now, the next part, which is also very important, is that a student should also have the same set of interests and values to be able to be successful in the field and also have a good satisfactory career path in that field. So if I am a doctor and I don't like talking to people, I don't like engaging with people, then no matter how good I am with those cognitive abilities, I am not going to enjoy that field as much or be good with my patients when they come to me. Same goes for teaching also, or same goes for psychology also. So you have to have a good matching between what you are good at, that is your strengths, your cognitive abilities, your academics, what are your values that you grow up with. So some people are inherently very altruistic or very helping in nature, right? So that is a value that you have been raised with, and that also translates into your choice of career. So an altruistic person is more likely to choose fields where they end up helping people. So such complex interplay of various things is what you need to look at when doing career counseling. So I would say the job of a good career counselor is to tie in all these things together and then give the correct suggestion to the students as well as the parents.
Yeah. What are the basic global trends that are followed in career counseling stream?
I wouldn't talk about the global trends because again, see, career counseling is something that is centric to each um, country, the social context. So even here, like if you go from urban to rural area, there is a difference in the way you conceptualize career, right? So overall, what we see is that a blend of good aptitude tests, which are looking at your abilities, interest tests, and values tests, is something that, and personality tests, obviously, and your learning styles. So if I'm good at learning information by hearing it or by actually doing experiments with it, so these are certain things which are commonly looked at when people go for career counseling.
Okay. So how does like career counseling and this cognitive psychology go hand in hand?
So the aptitude tests that I talked about, which are measuring your cognitive abilities, where do you get those from? You get that from cognitive psychology, where you have also theories of intelligence interplaying with it. Along with that, a good practice in career counseling is that they also tell you how to increase these abilities over time, right? So if you want to recall a lot of information, something as simple as increasing your reading, on a day-to-day basis and trying to reproduce that information in some way is going to help your memory in the long run. Or if you want to do reasoning and problem solving, getting the student to solve puzzles in a very interesting way. So these are certain techniques like we talked about earlier, which can be also applied to career counseling when you're giving the feedback on their abilities and how to improve that.
Any real life cases that had a huge difference, that you saw had a huge difference?
Huge difference after we
Yeah.
gave the advice. Okay, so actually I had this student who had come to me, and she was actually she had problems, academic problems as well as some psychological issues. I won't go into the details of it,
Definitely.
but to protect her privacy. But so she and her mother had come to me, and when I saw that okay, she was not able to actually focus on the test and has difficulty in solving the test, of course we had to take some corrective measures over there. And then when she came to us for the counseling sessions, she told me that she actually loves singing and she's actually very good at it. So rather than pushing her into a very mainstream academic path, we actually told her that why don't you try to pursue music where you are performing, that is a source of your livelihood also, so that you would get independence from your parents eventually. Along with that, why don't you start some small things, like she was good at baking and cooking also, so why don't you start that as a joint venture eventually. So this uh, grasping of the child's problem, the parents wish that the child, even though the child has problem, becomes independent in life later on and has some sort of livelihood, uh, which will again then translate into the child feeling confident with a higher self-esteem, that okay, I am able to do this just like my peers can, and not feeling that difference. So this is a case that stuck with me for a long time, because the complexity which was there, and also the way I had to navigate her career, because half the options which you give to neurotypical children were eliminated then and there.
Yeah.
So then how do you get a career out of such a complex situation, is something I would say that is really difficult, but at the same time enriching for you as a person also, that you understand and you're able to help in whatever little way you can.
Definitely. And can you just explain us about how cognitive psychology is a multidisciplinary field?
So, when you're looking at cognitive psychology, it is obviously going to get inputs from fields such as medicine, hmm, psychopharmacology, if you are going into that route. Another interesting thing is that the cognitive remediation that we talk about can also make use of various things, hmm, such as games, sports, art. So it is incorporating all of these things which are used in other fields into the field of cognitive psychology. Along with that, you're also taking into account other disciplines of psychology. So if a person is scared, anxious, obviously the person has to deal with that, then improve the ability. So we had seen a case where they were trying to improve the person's problem solving strategy, but she was so scared and anxious about it and was seeking reassurance from it. So why her personality was framed that way, why did she go into the clinical problem that she had, which actually affected her cognitive abilities, is what you take from clinical psychology, from personality psychology. So all of these things are integrated into cognitive psychology, because end of the day you're treating a person and you're dealing with a person and not just the brain per se.
Definitely. Thank you for this wonderful insight on cognitive psychology. I hope that whether our viewers are a student, educator, a learner, or even anybody, I hope you guys have the insights that you would really apply it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.